This over here is the RTX 5090 Founders Edition. And this is single-handedly the fastest and most powerful dual slot GPU in the world. And if you're a creator, especially a creator, then there's a ton of things about this graphics card that you should be super excited about, because there's new things. I would go probably as far as to say that this card is revolutionary and is gonna mark a very interesting point in history of GPU launches. But there's always a but, isn't there? So, Founders Edition 5090, what's it like? Let's talk. This part of the video is brought to you by Asus ProArt PX13, the ultimate 2-in-1 creator laptop with AMD Ryzen 9 AI CPU and Nvidia RTX 4070 GPU. The PX13 is one of the most compact and powerful 13-inch laptops out there. Create smarter and faster from anywhere with AI features and military-grade toughness. Go check out our full overview in the video description below. By the way, if you enjoy these videos, hit that likes button and subscribe button. They're your best friends. And if you need to reach out, I'll always get back to my Connect messages in 24 hours. The reason why this GPU is not in my hand but still in there is I'm running out of time. I'm gonna have to talk about it while it's still double checking some of the benchmark results, because I'm in the talks with Nvidia and seems like my card is not exactly performing in certain application like it's supposed to. We're gonna edit in post. Try to fix it. We'll see what happens. I've got one 5090 in here as well. This is a palette one. I haven't actually tested this one yet. It's still been Founders Edition. I can show you this, but I can't review it. Okay, so it's just there for show. But looking at the 3090, 4090, and 5090, there's some interesting things we can see. Obviously the GPU name, but then the process node, which we're going to talk about a little bit deeper later on. But you can see that RTX 3090 was the Samsung 80nm process. Then the 4090 and 5090 are on the TSMC 4nm or 4N4 node. Looking at the CUDA cores, from 3090 to 4090, there was a 56% increase, but from 4090 to 5090, there's 32% increase. So not as big of an increase, and that is going to be a little bit of a trend for this video. You can see the Tensor cores and RT cores in there, which will be very, very important for gamers and creators actually. But one of the biggest changes is the memory type. We're not GDDR6X anymore, but GDDR7, and the video memory capacity is now 32 gigabytes on the 5090. The memory bus has also increased to 512-bit, and the memory bandwidth is a whopping 1792 gigabytes per second. That is ridiculous. And the bus interface now is PCIe 5.0 x16. So if you want to use the card, you're going to have our CPU platform that supports PCIe 5.0. Now, how much of a performance difference would it make if it was PCIe 4.0? We're going to have to make a video. Would you like to see a video on that? Then from 3090 to 4090, one of the biggest things that happened was also the cache. Look at the L2 cache. We went from 6 megabytes to about 74 megabytes, which is ridiculous increase. Now, in the RTX 5090, we've increased for about 32 to 33% in L2 and L2 cache. What's also increased is the power limit. This beast pulls around 575 watts, which is ridiculous. And the MSRP is $2,000 for the Founders Edition. These cards there are probably going to go even higher. We'll have to see. Now we'll take a look at the benchmarks, but the way I tested all of these GPUs is a little bit different. Firstly, I'm running a 12900K platform and I'm using DDR4. I'm using the Asus Strix Z690A motherboard, which is probably one of the best DDR4 motherboard for the Intel's 12, 13, 14 gen. So we're creating a little bit of a CPU bottleneck there as well. It's not the best CPU out there. I'm using 64 gigabytes of Kingston Fury Beast RGB 3600 megahertz DDR4. I'm using Arctic Liquid Freezer 3, as you can see in here, in an odd position. We're using Samsung 980 Pro 1 terabyte for the main OS operating system, and we've got a 1200 watt Be Quiet power supply. If you want to check them out, the links are in the description below. Let's take a look at photo editing benchmarks, but before that, we'll have to look at just the very generic Geekbench 6 just to see where our GPUs line up. And the GPUs I'm testing here and the benchmark is an RTX 3090. Now, as much as you think a lot of people might not be actually upgrading from 4090 to 5090, there are some use cases where you should. In fact, I am seriously considering that. I'll explain that in a minute. But probably those people who are on the 3090 might be looking for an upgrade on the 5090. So is it worth it? So the 3090 is going to be the benchmark here, and for 3090 I'm using this Asus TUF RTX 1390. Then we've got an RTX 4090, and for that I'm using the Zotac Amp Extreme 4090, which is an absolute huge beast of a GPU. But also we can't leave AMD out of the equation. We're using the 7900 XTX. This is the Power Gullet Red Devil version to see what the best of AMD can offer into this conversation. And then finally, obviously, the RTX 5090 Founders Edition, as you can see here. The RTX 4090 is roughly about 67 to 81% faster in OpenCL Vulkan scores compared to the 3090. The 7900 XTX is actually about 20% slower on the OpenCL scores, but about 50% faster on the Vulkan scores. The RTX 5090 is about 77% faster in OpenCL scores and over double the performance in Vulkan scores, 120 roughly percent faster than the 3090, which is about 5% faster in the OpenCL compared to the 4090 and about 20% faster compared to the 4090. So about 20% increase from the previous generation. Now let's take a look at photo editing benchmarks if you're thinking about getting this for photo editing. Now, a big disclaimer here is for photo editing, you don't really need a 5090 to edit or get some photos. But there are more and more things in photo editing that can be accelerated on the GPU. If there is AI tasks, AI generation, AI detection, AI noise reduction, then the GPU can accelerate that, as well as an exporting task like in Lightroom Classic. You can use GPUs for that as well, which we'll hopefully going to see some of this in there. The overall scores are basically doing a lot of different tasks that this program can do, whether Photoshop or Lightroom Classic, and the rest of the system doesn't change. So the GPU change will show us how do you see overall performance in the actual program if the 5090 is actually worth it compared to the other GPUs. So looking at Photoshop first of all, and we can see that the cards really aren't that different from each other. The 5090 is about 5.4% faster than the 3090 in the overall scores. The filter score is about 10% faster. But if you look at the AMD 7900 XTX, then that card is faster than all of these here. So really, I would say in Photoshop, it's very hard to justify the 5090, but it was still interesting to see if it's worth it. Moving on to Lightroom Classic. Here you can see that the 3090 is a fantastic card. In fact, it's the fastest card that I'm testing for this application. For some reason, the RTX 3090 is the fastest one in the bunch here. Obviously, the Radeon 7900 XTX is very, very close to it, but the 4090 and 5090 are slower. The 5090 in fact is about 10% slower than the 3090. I do want to mention something in here. I've got a pre-released driver version that I have in there, and this is not really working particularly well in a lot of the applications, and a lot of the Adobe applications especially don't have full support for the 50 series GPUs, which means that what you're seeing there is a little bit screwed and a little bit broken. What I mean by that is you're not going to get the full benefits of the GPU. So the AI capabilities are most likely not going to be shown on Lightroom Classic benchmark in here. So if you're doing AI denoising or exporting, we're going to have to make another video on that. But just generally, not really a difference in the GPUs as well. Perhaps not worth going with the 5090 for photo editing. But we haven't talked about generative AI. We'll talk about that later. But now video editing, the big thing in here, and this is probably one of the best and biggest talking points about this GPU. The RTX 5090 now supports 422 decoding, not just H.265 10-bit 422 that I've always said only Intel can do. This 50 series can also do H.264. For example, this Sony a7S III right now is recording H.264 10-bit 422, and this is such a hard codec on the CPU. Often maxes out any CPU that you have there, very hard to edit. But now it can be accelerated on the RTX 5090. And I actually tested that, which video is coming out very, very soon in DaVinci Resolve, which we have full support for this GPU. And you can see DaVinci Resolve just utilizes all of it, and the media engines are working absolutely amazingly. So the encoding and decoding is gonna be a game changer and revolutionary for video editors, especially the 5090, because the 5090 has the most media engines inside their GPU. It has 3 encoders and 2 decoders. If we move down to 4080, then there's 2 on 4080 and 4070 Ti, and then the 4070 will have 1 of each. So if you want the best video editing performance and exporting performance, the 5090 is the best what you can get. Now we're going to be looking at Premiere Pro, but very importantly, the Premiere Pro version that I'm able to test doesn't actually support the whole media engines and the shebang of the 5090. So it kind of just uses it as kind of an upgraded 4090 and can't utilize all of the features of the 5090. So we're gonna have to make an update on that later on, but I'm expecting it to be a lot faster than what I'm seeing right now. But right now we're just seeing it as it is. The 4090 is roughly about 16% faster than the 3090, which was quite a big jump. The 7900 XTX is about 1 to 5% faster than the 3090, depending what you're doing. The long GOP score obviously is quite a bit faster. Now, when moving on to the RTX 5090, we're about 15 to 20% generally overall score faster than the 3090, which is about the same extended overall score as the 4090 and about 3.2% faster general overall score, standard score, as the 4090, which doesn't seem that big of a deal. And as you can see, the biggest difference is the GPU effects, that is roughly about 14.3% faster. But we're not even beating the 7900 XTX in long GOP scores. The AMD has actually got very good media engines, or very fast media engines to process it in terms of quality. Sometimes some people argue not as good as 50 series or Nvidia or Intel. But in terms of Premiere Pro performance, it kind of leaves me hanging for now, and we're gonna have to make an update, because I would expect the 50 series to perform a lot better in long GOP and some of these other scores. Adobe, please speed up your software support for some of this hardware. Now, in After Effects, this is the old After Effects for Geekbench, and they have done a newer one, but it's still in beta, so very soon we're gonna have to re-benchmark all of these again. But looking at the GPUs in here, the Radeon and the 4090 are slower than the 3090, but the RTX 5090 is about 3.5% faster in the general overall score and around 11% faster in the GPU score, roughly about 10% faster than the 4090. So we're seeing actually it's quite an okay difference between 4090 to 5090. Now moving on to DaVinci Resolve, and this is where we see the biggest difference really between some of these cards. But this is the reason why this guy is still actually just benchmarking. The DaVinci Resolve apparently is underperforming. And when chatting to Nvidia, I wanted to just see if my card is working well. It should be actually even faster than what it is right now. Just a quick note from the future, the results here on DaVinci Resolve are actually now fixed. So this is how the card performs, and it's now not slower than the 4090 or 3090. And it is performing well, especially in the AI scores, because I managed to fix the issue what this card had while I was benchmarking. Nothing to do with the card, just some software issues that I needed to force the software to actually know which media engine to use, because it was a bit confused, but not anymore. Now the 5090 in DaVinci Resolve, and the exciting thing is finally when getting the card to work like it's supposed to do, we can really see the potential of this card and what it can do. So we can see that in standard overall score and extended overall score, we are 46 to 56% faster than the 3090. That is quite a bit of an increase, especially in a workload where it's a mixed CPU and GPU workload. Now, if you look closely, the long GOP score, which is H.264 and 5 playback, it is 126% faster than the RTX 3090. That is absolutely ridiculous. But while we're talking about the video editing, I just want to underline certain things that are just ridiculously amazing about this. These media engines, let me just underline that one more time, they are unbelievable. They're revolutionary. They support things that haven't been supported before. And whether you're going with AMD or Intel platform, they can accelerate those like no tomorrow. And by no tomorrow, I mean no Intel QuickSync. Supports more codecs than even Intel QuickSync, which is fantastic. I can't wait to see what Intel's doing there, because now you can build a PC with AMD platform, AM5 for example, and have long support of upgrades available, and have a 50 series that basically offers you Intel QuickSync. This is just amazing. The decoders though, it's very, very interesting. I dive deeper into some of the fine print and asking really finally from Nvidia, they had to get back to me. The media engines actually support 9 streams of decoding of 4K 60 frames per second. So that means that the 2 decoders can play back 18 streams of 4K 60 frames per second, no problem. That's absolutely ridiculous. In fact, what Nvidia said is that their decoders are not limited to 60 frames per second. They have a total throughput they can handle, which is roughly 8K 75 frames per second, which roughly translates to 4K 300. You can use that with a single video at a higher FPS or multiple videos. So in essence, if you have a 4K 120 frames per second clip, you should be able to play that back very, very smoothly when we have support. Can't wait to test that in Premiere Pro. Come on, Adobe. And also it supports an extra AV1 ultra high quality mode, which is a higher quality AV1, but takes longer to encode. Now let's take a look at 3D performance. We've got Blender, and here from 3090 to 4090, that was basically double the performance, and that was absolutely ridiculous. A lot of people wanted to upgrade, especially 3D, from 3090 to 4090. It's ridiculous. The 7900 XEX is quite embarrassing here and doesn't work as well in Blender. As you can see, it's about 30% slower than the 3090, which means that this 5090 is gonna blow it out of the water. And here you can see that the 5090 is over 2.5 times faster than the 3090. 7,311 points in monster scene compared to the 2,786 points on 3090. So a lot faster than the 3090, but about 15 to 23% faster than the 4090. In terms of real rasterization performance, not that much faster than the 4090, but you've got more VRAM, which actually puts that card in a very, very appealing position, because a lot of 3D renderers want more VRAM, and that's what 5090 offers to you. Now, I would love to show you Octane Bench and Redshift as well, but those programs don't support 50 series yet at the time of me making this video. So we're gonna have to make a little bit of an update later on again for you guys. But we have an update for V-Ray, and here we can see quite interesting results. Obviously, the Radeon card is not supported, and the 4090 is pretty much exactly double the performance as the 3090. But the 5090 is 173% faster in the CUDA scores and 170 roughly on the RTX scores, which is ridiculous, and roughly about 36 to 37% faster compared to the 1490, which shows that roughly if everything's performing well, it's 30 to 37% faster in those cores, which means that if everything works well on the card, the drivers and software works, we can expect 36 to 37% faster performance than the 1490. Now we get to the other interesting parts. You've known roughly about the performance, which at the point of me testing it is not fully complete yet. What about the power draw? Now, this card pulls 575 watts. As you can see in Fairmac, it's ridiculous. On the other hand, when you're actually doing your 3D rendering or whatever, you don't really see it pull that much power. It's a lot less. And when measuring the power draw on idle, we've seen roughly around 20 watts pulled. So the idle power draw is not too bad. Now, I did feel a little bit cheeky and wondered, what does MSI Afterburner offer, and can we up the power? And yes, you can make this card pull 600 watts absolutely no problem, which is this power cable's limit, 600 watts. And you can do that even with the Founders Edition one. Now, never mind what these AIC or board partner cards can do. Absolutely ridiculous. Can't wait to see that. They're gonna have to result to the 600 watts what comes from the cable, plus 75 watts that comes from the PCI slot. So theoretically, about 675 watts, extra 100 watts. Wow. Then there's DLSS 4, which is really for gamers to offer more frames and smoother playback. But there is some other bits that I'm waiting for support, or this is actually something for creators as well. Now, there is something called a D5 renderer, which is quite a famous 3D rendering application. And in there, in viewport, the DLSS can actually utilize this and show you more frames when playing back some of your 3D things. So I'm super excited to see that maybe in some of the other applications as well. I mean, I'm thinking about Unreal Engine, for example, at first, where people would absolutely love to have DLSS 4.0 as well. As you've seen from the title, the 5090 is actually an AI card. DLSS 4 is an AI feature. But then there's also a lot of other AI things that this card can do. And this is the biggest feature about this card, AI capabilities. It's got so much AI power, it's ridiculous. For those people who know how they can utilize this for local LLMs, or if they want to do some generative AI, it's mental. Let me put it in perspective. In FP4, this 5090 can produce over 3,300 tops. So for reference, the RTX 4090 is 1,300. So that's more than double the performance. But let's put some other guys in the mix there. I've got an M4 Max in there, the fastest chip that Apple offers right now. And that one offers 38 tops. The neural engine, the NPU in there, is 38 tops. That's over 88 times slower than the RTX 5090. We're looking at some of the other cards from Intel. The fastest card available right now, the Arc B580, is around 288 tops compared to the 3,300 with this. Just pause on that for a minute. It's so much faster, so much better than anything else in the market. It makes sense why some of these billionaires are begging Jensen to please sell them some GPUs so they can use them in their companies. Now, it's very much due to the actual bandwidth of the memory, and we've got 32 gigabytes of GDDR7, which we mentioned already earlier, and the bandwidth for that is 1,700 gigabytes per second. So you're thinking, yeah, what you're telling me for? Like, what's something else there? If we are looking at DDR5, your system memory, DDR5, not DDR4, DDR5 at 6400 megahertz is roughly around 88 gigabytes per second, a ton faster. And how you can utilize this for AI generation is amazing. So I'm actually very excited to learn and utilize more AI or generative AI softwares. And the more they're going to come out, the more this supports. And I'm super excited. I think 2025 is going to be the year of AI, and you're going to see a ton of other AI things. And if you have this one, it can support it. And you, as a creator, you might want to use it or can use it with this 5090. And you don't have to wait as long as the 4090. And that's where this 5090 really shines. It is many times faster as the 4090 because the 4090 has less VRAM and slower VRAM. With this is utilized for the AI, and that's amazing. And now the downsides. There are a few things. Now, you might not be completely happy with the performance because if you look at the jump from 3090 to 4090, you can see here it's a lot bigger than from 4090 to 5090. Unless you're doing AI. And that's why a lot of people might be mad, because the performance difference isn't that different. But I actually found the difference why this is so. Now, the 3090 is on the 8 nanometer Samsung node, whereas the 4090 is on a 4 nanometer TSMC node. So basically 8 and 4, it's half the size, and you can pack a lot more performance and transistors on the same package. Whereas the 5090 is really the same as the 4090. Well, it is. It uses the same TSMC's 4 nanometer process node, which is N4, I believe. And that's why there is only so much you can optimize. They have built the architecture out from ground up for AI and for a lot of these things what the 5090 can do. And it's still impressive that this 2-slot card can cool 575 watts, but that's a little bit of a downside. They had to enlarge the actual GPU die, so you couldn't pack just more transistors on the same kind of space, and they had to up the power. Obviously Nvidia is showing that, look, the cooler is not a problem. We can cool it very cleverly in a small form factor as well. That's the two downsides. There is a but. The power draw and not as big of a jump to 1590. And then you'd be saying, well, is it worth upgrading then or not? Now, if you're not doing AI and if you're not doing video editing, then probably for 3D, the best bang for buck, 4090 is going to be amazing. Let's hope that the prices are going to come down, and check out these links in the description below for these cards that I'm using. Maybe they're even cheaper now. But for best bang for buck, the 4090 is going to be the card. But if you are doing AI, video editing, or you're interested in generative AI, then the 5090 is in a whole nother league and is absolutely insane. Because what we're doing here is video editing, which means a lot of playing back footage, exporting, GPU effects. The 5090 looks very, very appealing, makes me want to upgrade from the 4090 and 4070 Ti that my editors are using, because that would save us a ton of time, and because it's a business what we're doing here, money as well. So we'll have to crunch some numbers and think if the 5090 is worth it. But for you, let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you want to build yourself the best bang for buck creator PC, there's some build guides in the video description below. Thanks guys for watching. Bye bye.